back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys, so I'm here today to do a very exciting video, and this is to announce a long list for the Wellcome Book Prize this year. So if you've been following my channel for a little while, you may know that the Wellcome Book Prize is a book prize that focuses on rewarding books that deal with themes and topics to do with medicine in some sort of way and science. It can be fiction, non-fiction, memoir, anything in those categories. And for this year, they've come up with a list of 12 for the long list, 6 of which are non-fiction, 3 of which are memoirs, and 3 of which I think are just general fiction. So I want to announce the long list to you guys and say that Eleanor and I are going to somehow try and read as many as possible before the shortlist and the finalist are announced. Stay With Me, which is by Ayobami Adebayo. If I've said that wrong, I apologise. And this story is a fiction one, I believe. It follows a couple called Yejide and Akin, and they are married for quite a few years, and throughout the time that they've been married, the husband hasn't taken a second wife, although in the culture it is quite frequent for the husband to take a second wife. They, between them, have agreed that they do not want a polygamous marriage, and so they're dedicated to each other, they love each other, but quickly they realise that they are finding it quite hard to get pregnant, and eventually Yejide's family turns up with a new young woman who they introduce as Akin's new wife, and she realises the only way to save her marriage is to get pregnant, but at what cost? It sounds really interesting actually. The next one on the list is a non-fiction, and this is The Butchering Art, Joseph Lister's Quest to Transform the Grisly World of Victorian Medicine, and this is by Lindsay Fitzharris. This one has a pretty dark cover, as you can see. So this one, I believe, focuses on Joseph Lister, who developed some sort of antiseptic. Historian Lindsay Fitzharris goes back and studies the shocking world of the 19th century and the surgery and medicine that was going on. She shows things like theatres where operations were being conducted without anaesthetic just because people wanted speed over precision, and how back in Victorian times many were baffled by the poisonous and infectious things that kind of got into the patients they were operating on. They didn't know exactly how it happened. It sounds a bit grisly, and I think this person revolutionised things, so I'm guessing it's kind of his story. The next one on the list is In Pursuit of Memory, The Fight Against Alzheimer's, which is by Joseph Jabelli. This one is again, I believe, non-fiction, and of course it does deal with the topic of Alzheimer's, which is something that we've already dealt with a little bit from some of the other books that have been shortlisted before, so I'm intrigued to see how this one compares to some of the others that Eleanor and I have already read about Alzheimer's specifically. The next one on the list is called Plot 29, a memoir by Allan Jenkins, and this is an autobiography. To be honest, I'm not exactly certain how this one ties into medicine just yet. All I know about it is that it was about these two boys, who, one of whom is the author, one of them is his brother, and they were in the foster system, and then they got fostered by an elderly couple who couldn't quite give them everything they needed, and they started to grow flowers in the allotment near their home. I don't really know an awful lot more about this one. There's not a lot sort of saying how it links into medicine, so I'm intrigued about how this one kind of gets onto the long list. We'll see. The next one on the list is by Han Kang, who is an author I've read before, and this is called The White Book, and it's about a narrator who is haunted by the death of her older sister, which she is told about. The older sister dies just hours after being born, and the younger sister, who's the narrator of the story, is kind of haunted by the fact that her older sister, who never survived, didn't get to do all of these things, and she starts ruminating on the colour white in particular, so thinking about things like the swaddling cloth that her sister never had, breast milk that her sister never drank, and various other things that she sees in her life. It's kind of a fascination and an obsession with the colour white. Next up, we have a non-fiction which is called With the End in Mind, Death, Dying and Wisdom in the Age of Denial. And this one, I believe, is kind of the story of Catherine Mannix's time over 30 years working in the palliative care units and palliative care homes across UK. How in this new age people are living much longer, which overall is seen as a good thing, but actually for some it's really bad, and for some people it's a struggle. And she shows us the insight into what it's like to be one of these these palliative care people who is constantly surrounded by the death of the elderly. Next we have one of the fiction books, and this is called Midwinter Break. This one follows a retired old couple called Jerry and Stella. They go from their home in Scotland over to Amsterdam for a long weekend and a holiday together, and whilst they're there, their relationship kind of takes some nasty turns and they start to uncover some unexpected and unhelpful truths about one another, which really open up cracks in their marriage. And I guess there is something to do with some sort of medicine stuff in there, but again, I don't know quite how it links in. Next up, we have a non-fiction which is called To Be a Machine: Adventures Among Cyborgs, Utopians, Hackers and the Futurists, Solving the Modest Problem of Death. And this is actually a book that I've already heard of because my partner picked this up when we went to Bath together last year, and he's since read and enjoyed it. And this one is quite short, but it focuses on these futurist technology people who really want to defy death. They want to be able to integrate with technology and completely revolutionize the way that we think about people and robots and integration of them. And it sounds very bizarre, and I think it's told from the point of view of the author, who goes and interviews lots of these people who are interested in this futuristic robot utopian society, and it's kind of his journey finding out about this and then deciding what he thinks in the end. Next up, we have I Am, 17 Brushes with Death by Maggie O'Farrell. It's told from the point of view of the author, and it tells her life story and various different things that happened to her throughout her life that were brushes with death. So, for example, she had a childhood illness that left her bedridden for over a year. She had an encounter with a disturbed man on a remote path, and the ongoing struggle to protect her daughter from a condition that leaves her unimaginably vulnerable to life's dangers. Next up, another memoir is called Mayhem, a Memoir by Sigrid Rousing, and this one is a powerful memoir about the impact of addiction on a family. I believe this is told from the point of view of the author, and it talks about a family which was destroyed by addiction because one day there was a woman named Eva who was found dead in the London townhouse that she shared with her husband, who is Hans K. Rousing, presumably the brother of the author, and the author goes and explores what really happened and how it's affected her brother and also everyone else in the family since the event. Next up, we have another one of the non-fictions, and this is called Behave, The Biology of Humans at Our Best and Worst. I believe this is the story of the author's journey to find out exactly why humans do and behave the way that we do. He wants to look into whether it's neurological, whether it's something to do with biology, whether it's something that is even deeper enmeshed in human psyche. It's definitely something that sounds interesting, although I don't know if it's going to be too dense for me because the blurb on Goodreads is quite dense, let alone the book. We'll see. But I'm definitely excited to kind of find out a bit more. It does sound quite science heavy. And the final one that made the long list for the Wellcome Book Prize is The Vaccine Race: How Scientists Use Human Cells to Combat the Killer Viruses by Meredith Wadman. This one is again a non-fiction science-based one, so it probably is fairly self-explanatory from the title, I would imagine, but it starts in 1962 when Leonard Hayflick created and froze 800 tiny samples of what he called WI-38. Each of these cells was able to reproduce multiple times, and it was the first time that normal, non-cancerous cells were available in virtually unlimited quantities to scientists all over the world. So many of these cells became the basis for vaccines that are now commonplace throughout the world, and hundreds of millions of people have been immunized thanks to these vaccines against things like polio, rubella, rabies, chickenpox. I believe this book looks a little bit at like the ownership of these cells, so possibly harking back a little bit to The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which we've already read. And it sounds like it's going to be quite an interesting read. I'm definitely excited to give this one a go and find out a bit more about the science behind vaccines and immunisation. So the long list was announced on the 8th of February. The shortlist will be announced on the 20th of March. And Monday the 30th of April is when the finalist will be announced, the one that wins the prize, which I think is £30,000, so it's a pretty substantial prize. Definitely excited to see what makes it to the shortlist and what makes it as the finalist and the winner, but I'm excited to read as many as possible from the long list too. Do leave me your comments below. Which ones are you excited for me to read? Which do you want Eleanor and I to read and discuss? Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon in another video. Bye guys!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book. then come back and chat with me again.